So my mother, her entire life, was a giver, and not just in gifts she gave, the perfect gifts she gave to everybody for birthdays or holidays, but her entire life, she always gave the gift of her compassion, her help, and her time to anybody and everybody who needed help. She never failed to step up and help those who asked for it. And I think that's because she grew up in poverty. Her parents were Russian immigrants and came to the United States in the 1920s. They settled in Philadelphia. Neither of them had much money. They got married, had my mother and her brother, and they lived in the North Philadelphia neighborhood that at that time was a poor immigrant neighborhood of Strawberry Mansion. And my grandfather worked as a bartender in the local Russian club, and he really struggled to support his family with the small tips and wages that he made as a bartender. So my mother and her brother ended up on the list for the Salvation Army of receiving gift baskets every year for Christmas. This despite the fact that they were Jewish. But my mother never forgot about these amazing gift baskets of fruit and candy that they would receive every Christmas. And as I was growing up, she would always talk about those gift baskets. And during the holidays, when we would hear the Santa Clauses on the corner ringing the bells, my mother would give me, my brother, and my sister dollar bills and say, go up and put the dollar bill in the red metal bucket there. We did that throughout our lives. Along with having a poor upbringing, my mother also had the challenge of her mother, my grandmother, struggled with mental illness. When she lived in Russia, she was actually raped by the Tsar's Kazakhs during the pogroms. And when she came to the United States years later, after she got married and had my mother and her brother, when they were at school one day, a man broke into the house and raped my grandmother again. And after that, she had a mental breakdown and was never quite the same. So my mother grew up with immense empathy for people struggling with mental illness. And always, she knew that that illness usually stemmed from some tragic event in their lives. And she always wanted to help them heal their wounds and do whatever she could to help them through it. So my mother ended up becoming an artist and teaching at the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. And one day as she was leaving her work and walking to her car, she saw one of her former students on the street corner, and he was homeless. He was living on the streets. She went up and spoke to him and said, look, come home with me. Let me help you out until you can get back on your feet. So she brought him home. We lived in Columbia, Maryland, and she put a mattress in the basement for him to sleep. And every night for a week, he would have dinner with us. My mom went and bought him new clothes. He lived with us. But we started to notice some odd behaviors of him, and we realized he was probably schizophrenic. And one morning we woke up and he was just gone. And my parents noticed there were several items of the house that we were missing, and money was taken from my mother's wallet. But my mom didn't even think about that. She would have given him everything he took and more if she could help. She was only concerned about his well-being, what would happen to him. We never knew what happened to him. Another time, my mother, sister, and I were walking around the streets of Baltimore, and we saw a homeless woman on the corner speaking very loudly and waving a cup in the air back and forth. So my mother, of course, immediately went up and put some money in the woman's cup. The woman got quiet. She balled up her fist and punched my mother in the chest. Now, my mother was fine, and in fact, my sister and I started laughing because it was just such a bizarre scene to see. But my mother, it didn't stop my mother from thinking, oh, I shouldn't give, I shouldn't help. And her entire life, she continued to give the gift of her time and compassion. She volunteered in the Baltimore prison systems, teaching inmates how to paint. She volunteered with women's organizations and traveled the world, giving witness to the horrors of war and helping women and children who were in conflict zones. And I was thinking about my mother recently when, I don't know if you all know the website Nextdoor. It's a website where neighbors can post, oh, I lost my cat, I need help finding my cat, or I'm having a garage sale, or I need help finding a house painter. And a couple weeks ago, I saw there was a woman who posted about a young girl she had met who was pregnant and homeless. And she was asking her neighbors for help of, you know, any ideas of where I can go to get this young girl help. And neighbors, so many neighbors started saying, oh, let me give some money. Let me donate the gift of diapers. I'll do whatever I can to help. But there were also a lot of people who said, I think this is a scam. Who is this young girl? Who are you? Why are you asking us for help? I don't trust this. I'm not going to give anything. I was amazed at how many people doubted and weren't willing to step up to help. And I knew if my mother was around, she would have been over to that woman's house, would have brought her home, would have fed her, would have done everything she can, paid for her medical bills. And of course, throughout my life, because she was my mother's life, because she was such a giver, sure, there was times maybe she was helping people who didn't really need it. And my mother was at times called gullible or naive, innocent. But she always stepped up to help people. And it made me realize that I'd rather be called gullible or naive and always answer the call for help and maybe sometimes be wrong than never answer that call for help and sometimes be right. Thank you.